This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, BACFA. Welcome to another episode of Atomic Biscuits. This is 2025-0706 Independent Thinking. I'm going to start out over here at theblaze.com. CNN's fake news fumble, shaky anonymous sources backfire as Trump's Iran strike proves devastating by Candace Hathaway. Following President Donald Trump's strike on Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities, CNN hastily seized an opportunity to criticize the administration by reporting a leaked early assessment leaning on several anonymous sources who incorrectly claimed the attack caused minimal damage. Subsequent findings of widespread destruction reveal CNN's misstep and further highlighted legacy media's over-reliance on shaky insiders desperate to downplay conservative wins. On June 25th, CNN published an exclusive article from correspondent Natasha Bertrand and two other network reporters questioning Trump's claims that the strike completely and totally obliterated Iran's sites, citing several people briefed on a top-secret early Defense Intelligence Agency assessment. One source told CNN, "So the DIA assessment is that the U.S. set them back maybe a few months tops." Two unnamed individuals told the news outlet the strike did not destroy Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. One claimed that the centrifuges were still largely intact, and another alleged that the uranium was moved before the attack. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told CNN that the initial assessment was flat out wrong and torched an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community for leaking the top-secret report to the network. Still, after later assessments confirmed the administration's claims that the facilities were significantly damaged, CNN clung to its initial narrative and defended its journalists. "We stand 100% behind Natasha Bertrand's journalism and specifically her and her colleagues' reporting of the early intelligence assessment of the U.S. attack on Iran's nuclear facilities," CNN stated. CNN's reporting made clear that this was an initial finding that could change with additional intelligence. "We have extensively covered President Trump's own deep skepticism about it. However, we do not believe it is reasonable to criticize CNN reporters for accurately reporting the existence of the assessment and accurately characterizing its findings, which are in the public interest," CNN's statement added. Conservative media critics slammed CNN's strike coverage, blasting the network and other legacy media outlets for their pattern of leaning on dubious, left-leaning sources who consistently miss the mark, as seen during the COVID-era alarmism, the suppression of Hunter Biden's laptop story, and the downplaying of former President Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline. Curtis Huck, managing editor of Media Research Center's Newsbusters, responded to CNN's statement. "Why did you hire someone so patently averse to the fact, considering she claimed Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation?" Huck wrote, referring to Bertrand. "Or perhaps it's because you know she's a partisan who will take whatever the deep state hands her and runs with it." Chad Prather, host of The Chad Prather Show, asked CNN, "How about all the other things you've lied about?" Conservative commentator Vince Dow wrote, "Firstly, you blatantly misrepresented what the report even said. Secondly, you're literally spreading Pentagon propaganda to justify a war. How does it feel to abandon everything the free press stood for 20 years ago? Pathetic." As recently as Monday, CNN was still trying to push the narrative that the Trump administration's attack on Iran was largely unsuccessful. The outlet published a report stating that Rafael Grossi, The United Nations nuclear watchdog chief claimed it would take Iran only a matter of months to restart enriching uranium. The article reads, Rafael Grossi's comments appear to support an early assessment from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency, first reported on by CNN, which suggests the United States' strikes on key Iranian nuclear sites last week did not destroy the core components of its nuclear program and likely only set it back by months. The article cited Grossi's comments to CBS's Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, during which he explained that the strikes caused severe but not total damage. They can have, in a matter of months, I would say, a few cascades of centrifuges spinning and producing enriched uranium or less than that. But as I said, frankly speaking, one cannot claim that everything has disappeared and there is nothing there, Grossi said. On Friday, a CNN spokesperson told the New York Post that the outlet had received a letter from Alejandro Brito, Trump's attorney, accusing it of defamation and demanding a retraction. CNN defended its reporting. Trump called for those who leaked the assessment to be prosecuted. Last week, in a post on Truth Social, Trump wrote, "The Democrats are the ones who leaked the information on the perfect flight to the nuclear sites in Iran. They should be prosecuted." A CNN spokesperson confirmed to Blaze News that the outlet received a letter from Trump's lawyer, responded to it, and rejected the claims made. Again, that's over at theblaze.com. I think CNN has probably burned the last of what reputation they once had, to know that they are toting the water for the deep state propagandists, and it's really all out there in the open, and that they can't really get anything right, makes them really not very informative anymore. I'm going to move over to a site that I don't normally cover as part of our regular routine weekly review, but the BBC had this article, Chief Rabbi Attacks BBC for Airing Vile Jew Hate at Glastonbury. This is by Emma Saunders, Culture Reporter. The UK's chief rabbi has strongly criticized the airing of vile Jew hate at Glastonbury after a live broadcast of Bob Dylan's performance at the festival went out on the BBC, during which the band's singer led the crowd in chants of "Death, Death to the IDF," the Israeli Defense Forces. Sir Ephraim Mervis wrote on X, "This is a time of national shame. The airing of vile Jew hatred at Glastonbury and the BBC's belated and mishandled response brings confidence in our national broadcasters' ability to treat anti-Semitism seriously to a new low. It should trouble all decent people that now one need only couch their outright incitement to violence and hatred as edgy political commentary for ordinary people to not only fail to see it for what it is, but also to cheer it, chant it, and celebrate it. Toxic Jew hatred is a threat to our entire society." Speaking in Parliament on Monday, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy expressed concern over the situation, saying about the BBC, "When there is one editorial failure, it is something that must be gripped. When there are several, it becomes a problem of leadership." She added, "This government supports the BBC. That is why we are so disappointed that this has happened and have been so exasperated with the lack of account from the leadership, not just about this, but about a previous Gaza documentary and a number of other issues. The BBC is one of the most important institutions in our country, and that is why it is held to the highest of standards." Bob Dylan responded to the outcry in a post on Instagram on Tuesday, saying they have been targeted for speaking up. "We are not for the death of Jews, Arabs, or any other race or group of people. We are for the dismantling of a violent military machine," they said. They added, "We, like those in the spotlight before us, are not the story. We are a distraction from the story, and whatever sanctions we receive will be a distraction." The BBC did not respond specifically to the chief rabbi's comments, but pointed to a statement released on Monday in which the corporation said the anti-Semitic sentiments expressed by Bob Vylan were utterly unacceptable and have no place on our airwaves. The team were dealing with a live situation, but with hindsight, we should have pulled the stream during the performance. We regret this did not happen, the BBC said. The corporation said it would look at its guidance for future live events so we can be sure teams are clear on when it is acceptable to keep output on air. BBC Director General Tim Davie was at Glastonbury for a few hours on the day of Bob Vylan's performance. The corporation said he was informed of the incident, and at that point he was clear it should not feature in any other Glastonbury coverage. The BBC's editorial guidelines say editors should assess the risk of a problem arising in our live output, ranging from a local radio phone-in to high-profile events like music festivals or sporting fixtures, or breaking news or stories of a sensitive nature, such as a siege. During their set, Bob Vylan's singer, Pascal Robinson Foster, who performs under the name Bobby Vylan, also spoke about a record label boss he used to work for. That boss would speak very strongly about his support for Israel and had put his name to a letter urging Glastonbury to cancel Irish-language rap trio Kneecap's performance, the musician said. Who do I see on that list of names but that bald-headed expletive I used to work for? We've done it all right, from working in bars to working for blanking Zionists. Andrew Gilbert, vice president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, said he and others were absolutely horrified and are still absolutely perplexed by the onstage comments and their broadcast. He said the BBC could have stopped and restarted the stream and could have done more vetting in advance. A criminal investigation was launched on Monday over performances by both Bob Vylan and Kneecap at Glastonbury on Saturday, Avon and Somerset police have said. They have not specified which parts of Bob Vylan's or Kneecap's sets could be subject to the criminal investigation. The force said it had been appointed a senior detective to investigate whether comments made by either act amounted to a criminal offense after reviewing footage. The statement added, "This has been recorded as a public order incident at this time, while our inquiries are at an early stage." Both members of Bob Vylan, who were due to embark on a tour of America later this year, have had their U.S. visas revoked, it is understood. Ms. Nandy also told MPs she immediately called the BBC's Director General after the set was broadcast. She said outstanding questions remain, including why the feed wasn't immediately cut, why it was broadcast live given the concerns regarding other acts in the weeks preceding the festival, and what due diligence was done before deciding to put Bob Vylan on TV. When the rights and safety of people and communities are at risk, and when the national broadcaster fails to uphold its own standards, we will intervene, she added, and said she will continue to speak to the BBC in the coming days. Media regulator Ofcom also issued a statement saying, "We are very concerned about the live stream of this performance, and the BBC clearly has questions to answer. We've been speaking to the BBC over the weekend, and we are obtaining further information as a matter of urgency, including what procedures were in place to ensure compliance with its own editorial guidelines." Ofcom's role includes regulating the BBC's editorial standards and complaints and working to protect fair and effective competition. Ofcom's own broadcast rules include protecting members of the public from harmful and/or offensive material. Part of its code also covers regulating material that is likely to incite crime or disorder, reflecting the watchdog's duty to prohibit the broadcast of this type of programming. Meanwhile, the chair of the House of Commons Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee has written to Mr. Davie to ask for details of the BBC's procedures at Glastonbury, including broadcast delays, staffing, and contingency plans. Bob Vylan are due to perform at the Radar Festival in Manchester on 5th July. A Greater Manchester police spokesperson said, "We are aware that Bob Vylan will be performing in Manchester at the weekend. Greater Manchester is famous for promoting music of all genres, and we welcome all artists to our region. However, we will act immediately on any reports of commentary or actions that could be breaking the law." Meanwhile, an MP said on Monday that the row over Bob Dylan's performance at the Glastonbury Festival was a distraction from talking about the ongoing actual violence in Gaza. Ellie Chounds, Green Party MP for North Herefordshire, who attended the festival to give a talk, stressed that she completely disagreed with the punk duo urging death to Israeli troops, but criticized the amount of coverage the incident has had. Incitement to violence is totally the opposite of my politics, and I completely disagree with that, whoever it comes from, wherever it's done, she said. And that's over at the BBC. There are a lot of things here I think worth mentioning. The outrage, who is outraged, who permitted the activity, and should it be? Is it free speech? What role does Ofcom play? And how does a subsidized national broadcaster make decisions about consumption for its own viewers when it comes to taste, or whether it comes to violence, or whether it comes to ginning up problems? Who made this decision and why, and who the targets were, and should we care? I think the main thing that concerns me is the level of scrutiny on what can be broadcast, what should be broadcast, instead of allowing people to determine for themselves whether to turn off the programming and whether to go on about their business without being bothered. That's over at bbc.com. Well, we're quite a bit distant from COVID-19, but you still find people in masks. You still find people dealing with the aftermath of the jab. For this story over at thegatewaypundit.com, RFK Jr. unloads disturbing vaccine secrets on Tucker and surprises everyone on Trump. This is by Vigilant Fox. It's not every day an active HHS secretary sits down for 90 minutes straight with Tucker Carlson, but that's exactly what happened, and Kennedy instantly seized Carlson's attention with a chilling story of CDC corruption. He revealed that the health agency buried a 1999 internal study led by researcher Thomas Verstraeten, which showed an alarming 1,135% increase in autism risk from the hepatitis B vaccine. Kennedy said the researchers were shocked by the findings. So what did they do? They covered it up, according to Kennedy. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who are too young to be diagnosed with autism. RFK Jr. then explained the real reason why your pediatrician will kick you out of their practice for refusing vaccine. There's a published article out there now that says that 50% of revenues to most pediatricians come from vaccines. It's about the money. The higher the vaccination rate, the bigger the bonus. And that's why your pediatrician, if you say, I want to go slow on vaccines, will throw you out of his practice because you're now jeopardizing that bonus structure. To the claim that the vaccine autism link has been debunked, Kennedy had a message for Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, and everyone who smugly insists on it. None of the vaccines given to children in the first 6 months of life have ever been studied for autism. Let that sink in. He went further, revealing that the CDC actually did find a link when they studied the DTaP vaccine, but they dismissed it. Kennedy said they claimed it didn't count because the data came from VAERS, V-A-E-R-S, the very system they use to track vaccine injuries. So when the evidence pointed to harm, they simply claimed their own system wasn't reliable enough and took no steps to fix it. The vaccine corruption didn't end there. Kennedy attested that the CDC killed off a vaccine injury reporting system that actually worked because it worked too well. It showed that 1 in 37 vaccines caused an injury. Tucker was stunned. Of all vaccines, he said? Yeah, Kennedy confirmed. RFK Jr. explained that the CDC funded a study led by researcher Ross Lazarus. It compared a sophisticated machine counting system to VAERS. What did they find? VAERS was failing to catch over 99% of vaccine injuries. Adverse events from drugs and vaccines are common but underreported. Although 25% of ambulatory patients experience an adverse drug event, less than 0.3% of all adverse drug events and 1 to 13% of serious events are reported to the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. Likewise, fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported. Low reporting rates preclude or slow the identification of problem drugs and vaccines that endanger public health. New surveillance methods for drug and vaccine adverse effects are needed. Barriers to reporting include a lack of clinician awareness, uncertainty about when and what to report, as well as the burdens of reporting. Reporting is not part of clinicians' usual workflow, takes time, and is duplicative. Proactive, spontaneous, automated adverse event reporting embedded within EHRSs and other information systems has the potential to speed the identification of problems with new drugs and more careful quantification of the risks of older drugs. Unfortunately, there was never an opportunity to perform system performance assessments because the necessary CDC contacts were no longer available, and the CDC consultants responsible for receiving data were no longer responsive to our multiple requests to proceed with testing and evaluation. A new system also revealed that 2.6% of all vaccines or vaccinations resulted in an injury. So what did the CDC do? They shut it down in 2010, and they're still using VAERS today, even though it's a completely inadequate system. Preliminary data were collected from June 2006 through October 2009 on 715,000 patients, and 1.4 million doses of 45 different vaccines were given to 376,452 individuals. Of these doses, 35,570 possible reactions, that's 2.6% of vaccinations, were identified. This is an average of 890 possible events, an average of 1.3 events per clinician per month. These data were presented at the 2009 AMIA conference. In addition, ESP VAERS investigators participated on a panel to explore the perspective of clinicians, electronic health record vendors, the pharmaceutical industry, and the FDA towards systems that use proactive, automated adverse event reporting. But Kennedy didn't stop at old vaccine scandals. He also broke down Pfizer's own COVID vaccine trial data. That trial showed a 23% higher death rate in the vaccinated group. Pfizer gave 21,720 people the vaccine and 21,728 the placebo. One vaccinated person died of COVID. 2 placebo recipients died. They used this tiny difference to claim 100% effective based on relative risk reduction. But in absolute terms, it took 22,000 vaccinations to save one life. Over 6 months, 21 vaccinated participants died of all causes compared to 17 in the placebo group, a 23.5% higher death rate. And then there's the vaccine spokesperson Paul Offit, often seen on CNN and other mainstream networks. Kennedy shared an infuriating story about how he literally voted himself rich on the rotavirus vaccine. While serving on the CDC's ACIP committee, Offit voted to add rotavirus vaccination to the childhood schedule. Even as he was developing his own competing vaccine, he guaranteed demand for his product. At first, the first approved rotavirus vaccine, RotaShield, was yanked from the market for causing dangerous intussusception. Offit's vaccine, RotaTech, eventually replaced it. He and his partners later sold their rights to Merck for $186 million. As RFK Jr. said, Offit literally voted himself rich. When Carlson mentioned Fauci, Kennedy revealed how Fauci funded research that helped scientists hide evidence of lab-made viruses. A technique called seamless ligation allowed researchers to engineer viruses in a lab without leaving telltale genetic fingerprints. RFK Jr. explained. One of his fundees, Ralph Barrick from the University of North Carolina, developed a technique called the seamless ligation technique, which is a technique for hiding the laboratory origins of a manipulated virus. Normally, if there's a virus manipulated, researchers can look at the DNA sequences and they can say this thing was created in a lab. Ralph Barrick had developed a technique that he called the no-see technique, and its technical name was seamless ligation, and it was a way of hiding evidence of human tampering. He called it the exact opposite of what real public health work should be. Carlson cut in saying, "That's what you do if you're creating viruses for biological warfare." The conversation shifted to Trump, leading to one of the biggest highlights of the entire interview. First, Kennedy explained that Trump chose his cabinet in an orthodox way. He wanted to see 3 clips of each candidate performing on TV before considering them for the job. One of the things with President Trump is that he really knows how to pick talent. For every one of the positions that he picked, he wanted to see 3 clips of them performing on TV. He's very conscious of the fact that these people are going to be outselling his program to the public, Kennedy said. That's when Kennedy ended the interview with a bang, sharing his genuine thoughts about Trump for 3 straight minutes. It was one of the standout moments of the entire conversation. If you're on the fence about Trump, listen to Kennedy there. It might just change how you see him. I had pegged him as a narcissist when narcissists are incapable of empathy, and he's one of the most empathetic people that I've met, Kennedy said. He's immensely curious, inquisitive, and immensely knowledgeable. He's encyclopedic in certain areas that you wouldn't expect, he continued. Kennedy added that Trump genuinely cares about soldiers who go to war, citing how Trump always talks about the casualties on both sides of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Whether it's vaccines or Medicaid or Medicare, he's always thinking about how this impacts the little guy. And the Democrats have pegged him as a guy who's sort of sitting in the cabinet meeting talking about how we can make billionaires richer. He's the opposite of that. He's a genuine populist, Kennedy said. Here's the clip. Trust me, watching this is better than reading it. There's links here on this site, and I will leave these links over on my Gab account. You can find me at BACFA. Judge awards $4 million to St. Louis public school employees who sued over vaccine mandate. That's the story written by Jim Hoff over at the Gateway Pundit. A jury ruled on Thursday in favor of 13 employees with the St. Louis public schools system who were forced to take the COVID vaccine despite religious objections. The court awarded the 13 employees $4 million for the injustice. According to Schrag on Law, the plaintiffs Wanda Brandon and over a dozen other current and former employees in the St. Louis public schools system sued the Board of Education of the City of St. Louis, Superintendent Kelvin Adams, and Chief Human Resources Officer Charles Burton in the Eastern District of Missouri, raising claims of violations of the First Amendment's Free Exercise Clause, the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, Title VII Religious Discrimination, and the Missouri Human Rights Act. In the fall of 2021, during the height of the COVID pandemic, the St. Louis Board of Education adopted Policy 4624, requiring all employees to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by October 15, 2021, or obtain an approved exemption. The 16 original plaintiffs submitted religious exemption forms to their employer. The employees cited their Christian, Islamic, and Pentecostal beliefs that conflicted with the vaccine that was developed from fetal cell lines. The St. Louis Board denied all 189 of the religious exemption requests and forced the employees to take the experimental vaccine. The board then suspended or terminated the employees who refused to take the COVID vaccine. On Thursday, the city awarded a group of 13 employees $4 million for their treatment regarding the vaccines. Now, along those same lines, and almost at the same time, comes this story. Department of Justice, over 300 people charged, including 100 medical professionals, in $16.4 billion national healthcare fraud takedown. It's by Blake Wolf. The Department of Justice has charged 324 individuals, including 100 medical professionals, due to their alleged involvement in a $16.4 billion healthcare fraud scheme, marking the largest healthcare fraud takedown in Department of Justice history. The $16.4 billion scheme spanned across all 50 states, resulting in law enforcement seizing over $245 million in cash, cryptocurrency, and luxury vehicles, among other assets. Just in Arizona, a United Arab Emirates-based billing company had allegedly defrauded Medicaid of $650 million, and the company targeted Native American and homeless patients for addiction treatment scams, according to the Washington Examiner. 77 of the individuals involved were prosecuted by state attorneys general, while 247 individuals are facing federal charges, ranging from telemedicine fraud and opioid trafficking to other transnational identity theft schemes. This record-setting healthcare fraud takedown delivers justice to criminal actors who prey upon our most vulnerable citizens and steal from hardworking American taxpayers, said Attorney General Pam Bondi. Make no mistake, this administration will not tolerate criminals who line their pockets with taxpayer dollars while endangering the health and safety of our communities. FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino also described the bust as the largest healthcare fraud investigation as measured by financial losses in Department of Justice history. These criminals didn't just steal someone else's money, they stole from you, stated Matthew Galati, head of the criminal division at the DOJ. Every fraudulent claim, every fake billing, every kickback scheme represents money taken directly from the pockets of American taxpayers who fund these essential programs through their hard work and sacrifice. Of the $16.4 billion reported in the scheme, $10.6 billion was found in fraudulent Medicare claims through the stolen identities of over 1 million Americans. In one instance, Buffalo-based Dr. Joel Darinka is accused of producing and maintaining fake medical records, billing Medicare $5.6 million for audio-only telehealth visits, which were either extremely brief or did not occur at all, in addition to $29.6 million in fraudulent body brace orders, according to the Department of Justice. The federal government seized $324,683 from Turkina, and if convicted, his medical license will presumably be revoked. He is among the 96 doctors, pharmacists, nurses, and other licensed medical professionals charged with committing fraud. Medicine changed the playing field, stated U.S. Attorney Michael DiGiacomo on Monday. It's difficult to substantiate these cases. It often takes a long period of time. There's more nuanced layers. These cases do not happen without the doctor, because at the end of the day, the doctor is the one who signs the prescription form. We believe the doctors are one of the most culpable in this because without their prescription, nothing happens. In response to the newly uncovered massive fraud scheme, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Mehmet Oz stated that the federal government will develop a fraud war room, utilizing AI tools and other means to detect fraud prior to releasing public funds. We're stopping stolen taxpayer money from leaving the door, Oz explained. These are organized syndicates who are designing to hurt America. The mass wave of charges brought against individuals in relation to healthcare fraud under President Donald Trump marks a significant increase in efforts to catch stolen public healthcare funds compared to previous leadership in the Biden administration, which discovered $2.75 billion in false claims last year. There is more always over at One America News. That's OANN.com.
No inflation. Our country is strong. Our interest rate should be 3 points lower. If our interest rate was 3 points lower, that's almost $1 trillion in cost. And it's done just by the signing of a pen. But we have a moron at the head of the Fed. He's a moron.
Speaking of technology, do you have a top choice?
I do. I have 2 or 3 top choices.
Tell us those.
No. You almost got me there. No.
I feel like there is something brewing in the high profile arrests department. I know that many of us are anxious to see some movement in places that we've been waiting on a long time. But I think you have to set the stage in such a way that people understand what is normalized and what is not normalized. I think some of the fraud stories that we're talking about and some of the disinformation that we're getting from large news organizations all play into a singular point that is very cogent. I think we need to be very careful about what's coming next. One America also had this story. Sean Diddy Combs trial. Jurors send notes saying they're done for the day. This is I'm sure has marched on, but this particular article I thought was specifically interesting, even though this story has just been everywhere and all over every newspaper, and all the grody details are in everybody's minds. But it needs examining. This is by Sophia Flores and was updated Monday, June 30th. Judge Arun Subramanian has instructed the jury to continue deliberating following a note that he received stating the jury could not reach a verdict on count one. I received your note that you've reached verdicts on counts 2 through 5, but not on count 1. I ask at this time that you keep deliberating, he told the jury when they returned to the courtroom. Once the jury left the courtroom, they sent a note stating they have concluded deliberations for the day and that they will continue tomorrow at 9 a.m. The jury in the Sean Diddy Combs trials reached a verdict on some counts in the trial. The 12-member jury, this is at 2:17 p.m. that day, the 12-member jury made up of 8 men and 4 women reached a partial verdict on Tuesday afternoon. However, jurors were unable to agree on count 1 in relation to the racketeering conspiracy. The judge sent a note to Judge Arun Subramanian on Tuesday stating that while they were not able to reach a verdict on count 1, they were able to reach a verdict on count 2, 3, 4, and 5. In the Diddy trial, count 2 charges him with sex trafficking involving victim 1. Count 3 accuses him of transporting an individual across state lines for prostitution. And counts 4 and 5 involve additional acts of sex trafficking and unlawful transportation related to other victims. The sex trafficking charges alone carry a mandatory minimum of 15 years behind bars. Transportation to engage in prostitution charges have a maximum on 10 years behind bars. If Diddy is charged in count 1, which alleges that he led a criminal enterprise by carrying out multiple illegal acts, including sex trafficking, kidnapping, and fraud over several years, he could face a life sentence in prison based on that charge alone. And of course, this is just a little blurb about where things stood at the moment. And it got me to thinking about, how does this high profile sex trafficking case and even the cases involving speech, as the case with the BBC, how does this stuff compare to Epstein, and does it lay groundwork for opening up people's acceptance to locking up other high profile criminals guilty of heinous acts performed at Bohemian Grove type locations? Or how high up does this go? How deep is the rot? I think you and I know how deep the rot goes. The question is, will the Department of Justice and will the world unite behind digging in and tearing down these structures that have been erected as places of power? What we need to do is figure out how we can defang the real criminals, and then the noise around these other stories can just go away completely. So I wonder, there's a lot to discuss about the Diddy thing. I don't really want to dig too far into it. I think a lot of it has to do with who was there because they wanted to be part of an entourage and who enjoyed that lifestyle, whether it was drug-fueled parties or whatnot. It's really hard to say now, oh, well, maybe I was a victim, when you really enjoyed all of it and you really enjoyed being part of it, and all the attention that came with it and the money that came with it and the travel that came with it and the lifestyle that was there for you to enjoy. People have to take ownership of their choices. Living in victimhood is one of those things that has become real clear when later they think there's money to be had. They're just going to go back and talk about how they were wronged when actually they were there willingly all along. So this also plays into many of the themes that we learn about Epstein. And Epstein, again, is just an example. There are so many more of these structures out there where money, sex, trafficking, drugs, war, all the hydraulics of the world, the new version of triangular trade is well enmeshed in the way our world works. And what we need to do is break that machine and get rid of so many of these things that hurt people, the machine that eats people. So thinking of machines, trip across this story, the AIopportunities.com, Guillermo Flores website, has AI is the only thing keeping the world from total stagnation. This is from Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel breaks down why AI might be our last shot at progress and how everything else is collapsing. Peter Thiel just did the most mind-exploding, crazy interview I've ever listened to. It's so drastic, I still don't know what to think other than everyone should listen to it. So I dissected it piece by piece and organized it to draw some conclusions. This is what you cannot miss. The first statement here is we are stuck. Thiel believes in this stagnation thesis. His point, we exited a 200-year period of accelerating change. 1750 to 1970 was all about breakthroughs in physical reality, faster ships, railroads, cars, planes. It culminated in the Concorde and Apollo. But since then, nothing. We've made marginal progress in the world of bits, meaning internet, mobile, AI, but that's not the same as reshaping the physical world. In biotech or cancer research, for example, progress is either negligible or cloaked in overspecialization that makes it impossible to track. As Thiel puts it, the fact that it's so hard to answer whether we're progressing is itself cause for skepticism. 2. Our future has been stolen and it looks nothing like Back to the Future. Back to the Future 2, it imagined a 2015 world of flying cars, skateboards, and radical transformation. What we got instead was smartphones and cars that look the same. Thiel's kids watching 1985 on screen couldn't tell it apart from today. The world seems fairly similar. That's the cultural proof of stagnation. If a time traveler from 1985 landed in 2025, they'd be confused by the phone, but everything else would feel familiar. And the economic metric? Ask millennials. How are you doing compared to your parents? For most, the answer is worse. Number 3, we need to take more risks. Biotech is stuck. We've made zero progress on dementia or Alzheimer's in 40 to 50 years, Thiel says. Scientists are trapped in a dead-end beta amyloid theory that doesn't work but keeps getting funded. We need to radically increase the risks we're willing to take in medicine, aging, and beyond. Thiel wants a cultural return to the ambition of early modernity, Francis Bacon, Condorcet, when science promised immortality, not regulation. He tells the story of taking his PayPal team to a freezing party in 1999 where people bought cryonics insurance. That was the last generation who still believed they could live forever. Number 4, the moment Peter Thiel realized Elon lost faith in going to Mars. In 2024, Thiel joked to Elon Musk that if Trump didn't win, he'd leave the country. Elon replied, "There's nowhere to go." That moment stuck with Thiel. Mars, once a symbol of civilizational escape and ambition, no longer felt like a real option, even to Musk. Why? Because the woke AI and socialist government would follow you to Mars. The dream of Mars as a frontier for freedom had died. It was no longer a science project, it had become a political one. Thiel calls 2024 the year Elon stopped believing in Mars. Number 5, will AI become stagnationist? AI is the only real exception to our stagnation, but Thiel worries it might reinforce it. He calls AI more than a nothing burger, less than a total transformation. Like the internet in the 1990s, it might boost GDP by 1% a year, but won't restart the engines of human progress. And worse, it could become conformist intelligence. Like a Netflix algorithm that generates infinite okayish content, AI might flood the world with blandness, not breakthroughs. If you don't have AI, there's nothing going on, Thiel said. But he also warns if AI becomes too woke or compliant, it will deepen the very stagnation it claims to solve. 6. Is AI hype or is it transhumanism? Thiel sees modern transhumanism as not ambitious enough. It's not that changing your body is weird, it's that it's pathetic compared to what early modern thinkers and even Christianity aimed for. Transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul. He notes the word nature never appears in the Old Testament. The Judeo Christian story is about transcending nature with God's help. The critique of today's trans ideas, he argues, isn't that they go too far, it's that they don't go far enough. 7. The risk of the one world totalitarian state, how the Antichrist would take over the world. Thiel introduces his most apocalyptic idea that existential risk, AI, nukes, bioweapons, is being used to justify global governance. This leads to the ultimate form of stagnation, a one world state of the Antichrist. The logic is seductive. To avoid destruction, centralize control. Nuclear weapons, a global authority must manage them. Dangerous AI, global compute regulation. Thiel's framing, the atheist slogan equals one world or none. The Christian framing, Antichrist or Armageddon. The twist, the Antichrist doesn't come with innovation, it comes with regulation. He offers peace and safety, and people submit. Number 8, is Peter Thiel building the tools for the Antichrist? And there's a picture here of Palantir. Thiel's critics could argue if anyone's enabling global surveillance and control, isn't it Thiel himself via Palantir and military tech investments? He acknowledges the irony. He doesn't believe he's doing that, but concedes that many of the tools he's helped build could be used that way. He warns that we're already ruled softly by global regulators. The FDA doesn't just control drugs in the United States, but worldwide. Same with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Nuclear power was supposed to be the technology of the 21st century, he says, and it somehow has gotten off-ramped all over the world. Number 9. Are we already living under a moderate rule of the Antichrist? Thiel floats a chilling thought. What if the Antichrist isn't a coming tyrant, but the mild technocracy we already live in? 50 years of peace and safety had come at the cost of progress. He cites 1 Thessalonians 5:3, while people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly. Still, he insists we have agency. He rejects Calvinism and determinism. There's a huge scope for human freedom. We don't wait for the lion to eat you. Final thought, this isn't a neat, polished worldview. Thiel admits his thinking is schizophrenic, conflicted, unfinished, but that's what can make it valuable. It's a raw interrogation of the modern condition. Progress, collapse, immortality, stagnation, and power all tangled together. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I would like to know your thoughts. This is some interesting reading over here at the AIopportunities.com. Again, I'll leave this and all the links for today's show over on Gab at BACFA. Victor Davis Hanson was reported on over at the Daily Signal, a little digest of his commentary. The Trump deranged experts were wrong again, dated the 1st of July. We know they've been wrong when they signed these collective letters. 51 intelligence authorities assured us Hunter Biden's laptop was pretty much made up in Russia. But recently, in some of the marquee newspapers, sites, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, of course, the New York Times, They made a series of statements by so-called experts that are absolutely confounded by reality. Let's take Iran. We get all these stories that the combined Israel and later United States strikes on the three key sites of uranium enrichment in Iran may not have done very much. We had a leak from the Pentagon, of course, that the media picked up that there was marginal damage. Anybody who looked at the post-op photos could see that there was substantial damage, and so we had David Albright, one of the most prestigious analysts of nuclear proliferation. He said there was serious damage. We had the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Mariano Grossi, a serious damage. We had Israel, serious damage, Israeli intelligence, and our intelligence agencies in serious damage, except for this outlying one from the Pentagon that the left wing media picked up. So there is serious damage. I don't know why the left, especially, tried to suggest there wasn't. Remember, this is very, very ironic and paradoxical. The left told us before there was no need to strike Iran because they were months or years away from developing a bomb. There was no real existential danger now. As soon as we did the hit, they said, oh my gosh, there might be uranium that could be quickly enriched. Think of that. They were hyping up the threat after this complete obliteration of many sites than they were before. The same inexactitude is true of the reaction to the Iran war. People on the right, the MAGA base, said there would be 30,000 people killed, could cause World War III. We were told by the American and European left that we're going to mix up a cauldron of hatred. We were in Iranian airspace for about 25 minutes. No Americans were killed. Probably very few, if any, Iranians were killed. Immediately, President Donald Trump was able to enact a ceasefire when Iran retaliated and hit our base in Qatar with some ballistic missiles. We had 22-year-old, 23-year-old skeleton crews manning those Patriot batteries. They knocked them down. Trump did not reply. End of story. No World War III, no 30,000 killed, no endless wars. Then we get to the border, and we're told that there's only one solution for the border, and that is comprehensive immigration reform. We heard that for years. In fact, all that we needed was a new president to enforce existing laws. We were told, even Donald Trump, should he come in and get everything he wants, there's no way you can reduce 10,000 people a day to zero. He did that. He did that. We were told that self-deportation was a myth. That was former Senator Mitt Romney's idea in the 2012 election. He kept saying, we can self-deport a lot of people. They will want to leave. But he had no plan how to do it. Donald Trump's immigration and customs enforcement and border patrol and Justice Department came up with a tripartite system. If you self-deport and you go back and you never want to come back, you can legally. You can reapply, but if you're apprehended in the United States illegally, you can't come back for at least 10 years. And we'll give you $1,000 to go back, and we'll pay your air ticket deep into your country. And you know what? Almost 1 million people have self-deported, and immigration is now exclusively a problem of how to round up the people who came under President Joe Biden's administration, not to prevent new people. They're not coming because of these deterrents. Finally, the Wall Street Journal had told us that tariffs in March and April, they're going to crash the stock market. They're going to raise prices. We'd have hyperinflation. We're going to have a recession. We're going to lose jobs when coupled with deportation, of 1 million people leaving and another 300,000 or 400,000 deported. And yet, here we are in June, and the stock market is at a record high. The Japanese, the Chinese, their prices for their products, despite the tariffs that they're paying, are the same, if not lower. Job creation is good. What am I getting at? Donald Trump is pretty commonsensical. If you take 1 million people away that were working in the shadows at cheaper wages and hurting American job opportunities, and you make countries that had asymmetrical tariffs and were responsible for a $1.1 trillion trade deficit, and you can stop that, and they still want entry into the American market, then you have an economic renaissance. So, just to conclude, on nuclear proliferation, wrong. On a forever war following the bombing of the uranium enrichment plants in Iran, wrong. Wrong on the border that couldn't be defended, that you couldn't stop illegal immigration, you couldn't self-deport people. Wrong on tariffs, wrong on the so-called trade war, no recession, no inflation, no sudden loss of jobs. What is the analysis that binds all of us together? Whether it's the Wall Street Journal, as I said, or Bloomberg, or any of these so-called economic gurus who write on those pages, you should try to shed your Trump derangement syndrome because it's really affecting your powers of judgment and analysis, and you're going to lose readers. You're so wedded to the idea that Donald Trump is going to destroy the United States because of your personal animus, you cannot see that most people have common sense solutions. Close the border. Tell people to leave who are here illegally. Tell countries not to put tariffs on our goods unless they want tariffs on theirs. And don't ever underestimate the United States Air Force when it flies into an undefended airspace. In short, most of the criticism of Donald Trump was not based on reality. Is this going to stop that fraudulent reporting? No, it's going to continue, but we're going to be astute and awake for their inconsistencies. That's Victor Davis Hanson. I just think that we've got to really consider being independently thoughtful. And that's really what I'm sharing with you this week is be your own judge, do your own deep dives, analyze, and be happy. So much of what's on the airwaves is just there to demoralize. Go forth and conquer. From the white sand beaches of the emerald shores, from the free state of Florida, on the Gulf of America, this is BACFA.
Thanks for joining us for Atomic Biscuits. Tune in again next week for more news and music. Check out BACFA on Gab at BACFA, as well as Bitchute, Rumble, D-Live and Odysee. Check out LastScoutRadio.com for fun content. Listen to WBN 324 on radio stations around the world, on many streaming platforms, and World Broadcasting Network WBN 324.zil.